Alright, hello class. Okay, yes, midterms na. And of course, we have to start with the topics that that we were not able to finish during our first grading period. So for this video, I will be discussing the next step that we perform after fixation if we are talking about your routine tissue processing. And after decalcification, if what we are processing are your mineralized or calcified tissue samples. Okay, and what is that step? That step is your dehydration. Okay, so from the term itself, dehydration, we all know what the prefix D means. Okay, so what does D mean? It means to remove. And what are we trying to remove? We are trying to remove the hydration that is present in your tissue sample. Okay? So in simple terms, when we say hydration, remember that hydration pertains to the presence of your water molecules. So, when we say dehydration, it involves the removal of your water molecules. Okay? So along with your water molecules, the process of dehydration also serves to remove the fixative from our tissue sample. Okay? Ayan. So it's very important that we qualify sorry, what water molecules are we trying to remove from your tissue sample? Remember that your water, it is a very important component, both of your extracellular fluid and your intracellular fluid. Okay? And so, madam, what water molecules are we trying to remove from your tissue sample? So, take notes, okay? Mag-add lang po ako ng annotation. Alright. Okay, wait lang, guys. Ayan. So, take note that what we are trying to remove, sige, hydration. So, this is due to the presence of your water molecules in your tissue samples. Okay? So, water molecules, we have to, again, qualify. What water molecules are we trying to remove from your tissue sample? Okay? Number one, we are trying to remove water molecules that are present intercellularly. Okay? So again, when we say intercellularly, it means water molecules that are present in between your cells. Okay? So apart from intercellular water molecules, we are also going to remove water molecules that are present extracellularly. Okay, so when we say extracellular, it means outside of your cells. So that means, okay, we are not trying to remove, I repeat, we are not trying to remove water molecules which are found in the intracellular environment. So when we say intracellular environment or intracellular water molecules in particular, these are water molecules that are present inside your cell. Remember, okay, that the cytosol, diba? The cytoplasm that is present inside your cells, the predominant component is water. Water in your cytosol or in your cytoplasm, it is actually the one that is responsible for the turgor, diba? For the turgor, okay? Baka mamaya mali yung pagkasabi ko. Turgor. Okay. Turgor. Okay. It is the one that is responsible for the turgor character of your cytoplasm. Okay. So, in short, water is a very important component of your intracellular environment. Okay, so it is needed in order to maintain the normal morphology, the normal size and shape of your cells. So if you remove intracellular water molecules, of course, it will affect, okay? It will affect the morphology of your cells. And we don't want that to happen. Because what do you want the pathologist to observe? You want the pathologist to observe the cells in as lifelike manner as possible. Okay, so please take note ha. The water molecules that we are removing from your tissue sample are those which are found in the intercellular and the extracellular fluids or environments of your tissue sample, not the ones which are present intracellularly. Okay, ayan. And apart from that, okay, I would also like to emphasize on the compatibility, okay, because this will help you understand why we have to perform processes or the steps prior to your infiltration. Okay, so the process of dehydration, this is actually performed in order to make your tissue sample compatible with the infiltrating medium that is commonly used in the laboratory. So again, what is the infiltrating medium? What is the embedding medium that is oftentimes or that is routinely used in the laboratory? It's your paraffin. Okay? Ayan. So before we dig deeper with your paraffin, okay. So take note that compatibility, i-explain ko lang po saglit. Take note guys or class that compatibility of your reagents, compatibility of your tissue sample to the reagents, it is very important. Okay? And compatibility, this is determined. Okay? This is determined by the miscibility of substances. So again, when we say miscibility, another term that you can use is solubility. Okay? So compatibility, this is dependent upon the miscibility or the solubility of your substances with one another. So our rule is that if a reagent or if reagents, okay, so two reagents, say for example, if two reagents are soluble or miscible with one another, that means they are compatible. Okay? So if for example naman, your reagent 1 is not miscible or it is not soluble with your reagent 2, then that means they are not compatible. Okay? So compatibility is determined by the miscibility or solubility of your reagents with one another. Okay? Yan. So clear yun ha. Now, we take into consideration the compatibility of your water molecules to your paraffin. Okay? Actually, this is very easy to see even in your houses. Okay? So, ang paraffin, it's the same material that is utilized in making candles. So if you have candles at home, you can try this. You melt your candle, you put water in it. Are they miscible with one another? Are they soluble with one another? No, they are not. Okay? So that's the problem. The problem is that your water molecules, okay, they are not, okay, they are not soluble, they are not miscible, soluble yung sinabi ko, they are not miscible, they are not soluble in paraffin. Okay? So again, we go back to compatibility. That means your paraffin or your water molecules, they are not compatible with paraffin. Okay? They are not compatible with paraffin. And so, what can you say about your tissue sample containing now your water molecules? Is it compatible with your paraffin? No. Okay? So it's not compatible. Your tissue sample containing water molecules is not compatible with your paraffin. Okay? So if one is not compatible, if one reagent is not compatible with the previously used reagent, or if one reagent is not compatible with a substance that is present in your sample, it will not be able to penetrate your tissue sample. Okay? So say for example, ang daming Paul. Okay? Say for example, you have a fixed tissue sample. If you are going to immerse it directly in your paraffin, okay, since the water molecules are still present in your tissue sample, your paraffin will not be able to penetrate. Okay? It will not be able to penetrate. It will not be able to remove or to replace the water molecules that are present there because they are not compatible. Nakuha? Okay? So that's why it's important for us to perform the process or the step of dehydration so that we would be able to remove the water molecules that are present inside our tissue sample, thus making our tissue sample compatible with the paraffin wax that is routinely used for infiltration and embedding. Alright, so yan. I hope everybody understands, okay? The purpose of us removing your intercellular and your extracellular water molecules, okay? So how do we perform the process of dehydration? Okay, so the process of dehydration is performed using increasing strengths of dehydrating agents. Okay, so when we say dehydrating agents, the most commonly used type of dehydrating agents in the laboratory are your alcohols. Okay, we have your alcohols. Okay? So, ito po yung pinaka-common routine na ginagamit natin na dehydrating agents in the laboratory. Okay? So, we have your alcohols. Okay? So, sabi niya dyan, it says there, we have to make use of increasing strength of dehydrating agents. So when we say increasing strength of dehydrating agent, okay, we are using increasing concentrations. Okay, so we are using increasing concentrations of your dehydrating agent in short. Okay, yes. Why do we have to make use of increasing concentrations of your dehydrating agent? Okay, before I explain that. So again, wag malilito ha kasi um, actually minsan medyo nakakalito. I'm sorry, Sam. I'm speaking Tagalog. Okay. Sam, I'm serious. You have to learn Tagalog, okay? Because I'm fond of speaking in Tagalog because I love Tagalog. Okay? Sam. All right. Sige, for Sam. Sometimes it's quite confusing, okay, to make use of the term increasing, decreasing, right? And so I would just like to clarify, of course, for those who are still confused by the term increasing and decreasing. Okay, so when we say increasing, we start with lower concentrations first. Okay, and then after that, we move to your higher concentrations. Okay, so increasing means making use of lower concentrations first, and then after which you move to higher concentrations. Okay. What is the purpose of making use of your increasing concentrations from lower to higher? Bakit? Okay. Bakit kailangan increasing concentrations? This is, okay, to facilitate the smooth diffusion. This is to facilitate the smooth flow of molecules. Okay? Remember, tatanggalin mo. You are going to remove your water molecules and you are going to replace it with your alcohol. So that means there is an exchange in the molecules inside your tissue sample. Okay, so in exchange for the water molecules that are removed, you are going to replace it with your dehydrating agent molecules or your alcohol molecules. Okay, if you go back, okay, to your knowledge in biochemistry, if there is a high difference in the concentration of one, okay, environment as compared to another environment, okay, there will be a faster rate of diffusion. There will be a faster rate of exchange of your molecules. So that means a high difference in the concentration. This is otherwise referred to as your concentration gradient, right? So the difference in the concentration of two environments. So in this case, we are considering your tissue and your dehydrating agent. Okay? So if there is a high concentration gradient present between your sample and your dehydrating solution, what can you say about the rate of exchange of your molecules? What can you say about the movement of your molecules? It's fast. Okay? Yan, pag masyadong mabilis yung yung diffusion, yung exchange ng molecules if there is a high concentration gradient. Okay? And this fast movement of your molecules, this will lead to distortion. Okay? Distortion of what? Distortion of the details which are supposed to be examined or which are supposed to be observed by the pathologist during microscopic examination. All right? So that's why you have to make sure that the concentration gradient is not too high. So that's the reason why you start with lower concentrations. Okay? Another problem with the use of high concentrations, okay? Another problem with the use of higher concentrations is that higher concentrations of your dehydrating agent, okay, particularly your alcohols. So this will lead to surface, okay, this will lead to surface hardening. Okay, so that means, say for example, you have here your tissue sample. Okay, so if you are going to immerse your tissue sample in your high concentration alcohol or high concentration dehydrating agent, what happens is that, okay, what happens is that the surface, okay, the surface of your tissue sample becomes hardened. Okay? And of course, if the surface of your tissue sample is hardened, this will interfere with the penetration of your dehydrating agent into. Okay, so this will interfere with the penetration of your dehydrating agent into the inner portions of your tissue sample. Okay, of your tissue sample. So that means the penetration of the inner parts of your tissue sample will be poor. There will be poor penetration. And this will lead to inadequate dehydration of the inner parts of your tissue sample. Okay, so that's why we do not start with high concentrations of your dehydrating agent. You have to start with lower concentrations first. Okay, ayan. Particularly, yan, if you are going to make use of your absolute alcohol, ay talaga, the surface of your tissue sample will really become hardened. Okay, yan. Absolute alcohol is 100%, right? 100% concentration. Okay, so before we move on, I would just like to erase all of my side notes. Wait, ayan, na-record ko. Nadala na kasi ako eh. All right. Okay, so what are the different factors that we have to consider when we are performing the dehydration process? Okay, so factors affecting dehydration. So number one, we have to consider the type of tissue sample. Okay, the type of tissue sample. So as for the dehydration process, tissue samples are categorized into whether they are delicate tissues or normal tissues. So when we say delicate tissues, a good example of this would be your embryonic tissues. Okay, so they are considered to be delicate tissues. Okay. So since they are delicate tissues, what can you say about their susceptibility to an increase in the movement or an increase in the rate of movement of your molecules? What can you say? Yes, they are more susceptible. They are more sorry po. Okay, they are more vulnerable to uh to to the movement, okay, to the rate of movement of your molecules kasi kaya nabulol ako. Okay, so your delicate tissues therefore, ulitin ko na naman they are more susceptible to, okay, the rate of movement of your molecules. Okay, thus we have to lower down the concentration gradient that is present between your tissue sample and your dehydrating agents. So how can we lower down the concentration gradient? We start at a lower concentration. Okay? So for delicate tissues, we start with 30% concentration of your alcohol or 30% concentration. Yes, alcohol ito. Okay, of your alcohol. Okay, and then we move on to higher concentrations until such time that you reach your 70%. Okay, why 70%? Because this is the concentration of alcohol that is soluble in the routinely used clearing agent. Okay, so what is the routinely used clearing agent in histopath? We have your xylene. Okay? And so you have to end up with the concentration of alcohol that is soluble or that is miscible in your xylene, so that your tissue sample becomes compatible with the next reagent. And what is the minimum concentration of alcohol that is soluble in your xylene? It is 70%. Okay, yes, 70%. If you can still remember, in the preparation of our alcohol reagents, okay, the solvent that is utilized, okay, or the diluent that is utilized to decrease or to make a particular concentration of your alcohol is still distilled water. So say for example, yung 30% alcohol contains a significant amount of the solvent. And the solvent is distilled water. Okay? So that means lower concentrations of alcohol in particular contain significant amount of water. And the presence of water, this affects the solubility of alcohol to your xylene. Nakuha? Okay, yan. So, in short, you have to end at 70% because this is the least concentration of your dehydrating agent or of your alcohol that is miscible in xylene. Lower concentrations are no longer miscible in xylene, and it will make your xylene turn milky. Okay, so it will make your xylene turn milky. Okay, yan. So you have to end with 70%. Okay, yes. So another, we have your normal tissues. So for normal tissues, we start with, okay, we start with 70%. All right, so we start with your 70%. alcohol, okay? And then we end with either your 95% or your 100% alcohol. Okay, so take note that your 100% alcohol, this is otherwise referred to as your absolute alcohol. So in the laboratory, it's actually very expensive if you are going to make use of absolute alcohol as the last, okay, as the last concentration of your dehydrating agent. Okay, so that's why in most of the laboratories, in most of the histopathology laboratories that we have, so we end at 95%. Okay, because it's more practical, it's more economical for the laboratory rather than using your absolute alcohol. Right? Yes. So that is one factor that we have to consider during the process of dehydration. Okay. So another factor that we have to consider in dehydration is, of course, the volume of your dehydrating agent. Okay. So take note that for the volume, the required is 10 times the volume of the tissue. Okay. So I repeat, the required is 10 times the volume of the tissue sample. Okay, so just to review our knowledge on the required volume of your reagents. So fixative, yes, the optimum is 20 times the volume of the tissue. So your decalcification, 20 times also, okay, the volume of the tissue sample. Okay, and for dehydration, we have 10 times the volume of the tissue sample. Right, so do not forget. Okay, another factor that we have to consider would be the immersion. Okay, the immersion or the duration rather. Yeah. So saglit lang guys. All right. So another factor that we have to consider is the duration, okay, of the duration of immersion of your tissue sample in your uh, in your in your dehydrating agents. Okay? Yes. So in particular, we are concerned about prolonged immersion. Okay? Ito yung mas concerned tayo. So I repeat, we are more concerned about the effects, okay? The consequences of prolonged immersion. Okay? So if for example naman, before we go to prolonged immersion, if there is inadequate dehydration, of course, we don't want that also. Okay, but however, it's easier to remedy if there is inadequate dehydration as compared to prolonged dehydration or prolonged immersion. Okay, so depending upon the concentration in which your tissue sample para akong hindi okay. Depending upon the concentration in which your tissue sample was immersed in prolonged periods of time, okay? So it will have varying effects to our tissue sample. Okay, so in particular, if you are going to immerse your tissue sample in prolonged period of time or periods of time in your high concentrations of alcohol, this will result to hardness, okay? So this will result to hardness, okay, and brittleness of your tissue sample. Okay? So that means your tissue sample will become hard and brittle. Okay? And of course, if your tissue sample becomes hard and brittle, so this will affect the cutting process or the sectioning of your sample. So in particular, so this will result to difficulty, okay, in sectioning. Okay, difficulty in sectioning your tissue sample. All right. Another if, for example, you immerse your tissue sample in low concentrations of your alcohol. Okay? If you immerse your tissue sample in prolonged periods of time in low concentrations of your alcohol, so this will result to the maceration. Okay, so this will result to the maceration of your tissue sample. Okay, so your tissue sample will become macerated if you are going to immerse it in prolonged periods of time in your low concentrations. All right, another consideration is the temperature. Okay, yes, the temperature. Actually, for the required temperature of dehydration, there is none that was mentioned or that is mentioned in the book by Gregorius. Okay, so it only mentioned one temperature, which is 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, so 37 degrees Celsius, this will increase the rate of dehydration, and this is oftentimes utilized for tissue samples that require urgent examination. Okay, so I repeat, only one temperature was mentioned in relation to the dehydration step, and that is your 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, so 37 degrees Celsius will increase the rate of dehydration, and it is utilized for tissues that require urgent examination. Okay, another factor that we have to consider is, of course, agitation. Nasa inyo na yan. Okay? So, agitation, this will tend to accelerate. Okay? This will tend to accelerate diffusion. Okay? This will tend to accelerate diffusion. And of course, if the diffusion of your molecules is accelerated, then the dehydration process becomes more rapid. Okay, yes, all right. Another is the incorporation. This is particularly applied, okay? Yes, or utilized in conjunction with your alcohol dehydrants or dehydrating agents, okay? So we have your anhydrous copper sulfate. So I repeat, your anhydrous copper sulfate, so this is used in conjunction with your alcohol dehydrants or dehydrating agents. Okay? So what is the purpose of incorporating or how do we incorporate muna? Okay? So how do we incorporate your anhydrous copper sulfate? Okay, so say for example, this is your container. Okay, so 1/4 inch of your anhydrous copper sulfate is placed at the bottom. Okay, so it is placed at the bottom of your container. So we have 1/4 inch of your anhydrous. Yan, meron dyan sa inyo. Anhydrous copper sulfate, okay, is placed at the bottom of your container. And what is the purpose of your anhydrous copper sulfate? So from the term itself, anhydrous, what do we mean when we say anhydrous? It does not contain water. Okay, so since it does not contain water, it has a high affinity to your water molecules. Thus, the anhydrous copper sulfate placed at the bottom of the container will facilitate the removal of water molecules from your dehydrating agents or from your dehydrating fluid. Okay, and how would you know that your anhydrous copper sulfate is already saturated with your water molecules? Okay, so your anhydrous copper sulfate, okay, will turn blue. Blue dapat yan, ah. Okay, so I repeat, saturation of your anhydrous copper sulfate is indicated by a blue color. So if it turns blue, it means that it is already saturated with your water molecules. Okay, so those are the different factors that we have to consider in the process of dehydration. So what are the different dehydrating agents or dehydrants that we can use in histopath? Okay, ano kaya yung mga pwede nating gamitin? Okay, so we start off with your alcohol dehydrating agents or alcohol dehydrants. Okay, so the most, just like what I have mentioned a while back, the most common dehydrating agents that we use in the laboratory are your alcohol dehydrating agents or alcohol dehydrants. Okay, so there are several types of alcohol that we can use for dehydration. The first one is your ethanol. Okay? So ethanol, this is a clear, colorless, flammable liquid, and it is considered to be the best dehydrating agent for routine dehydration. Okay? Why is it considered to be the best? Because it is fast-acting, it is miscible in many solvents, and it is capable of penetrating your tissue sample easily. So apart from that, additional advantages of your ethanol include the fact that it is not poisonous, it is not poisonous, okay, and it is not very expensive. Okay, so it's practical, in short, for the laboratory to make use of your ethanol for routine dehydration. Okay, yes. The problem with your ethanol or precautions, okay, with the use of ethanol as a dehydrating agent is that long immersion, okay, or prolonged immersion in high concentrations should be avoided. Okay, so I repeat, prolonged immersion or long immersion in high concentrations should be avoided, particularly if you are going to make use of your absolute ethanol. Because absolute ethanol causes over-hardening of your tissue sample. Okay, so I repeat, absolute ethanol in particular causes over-hardening of your tissue samples. Okay, another dehydrating agent, alcohol dehydrating agent that we can use in the laboratory is your isopropyl alcohol. Okay, so your isopropyl alcohol class, this is utilized as a substitute for your ethanol. However, take note that, okay, take note that your isopropyl alcohol is only utilized as a substitute for ethanol, okay, if you are going to perform paraffin, okay, if you are going to perform paraffin infiltration, okay, and embedding. Alright, so this one, your isopropyl alcohol, it is not recommended. Okay, it is not recommended for celloidine infiltration and embedding. Okay, so it is not recommended for celloidine infiltration and embedding. Only for paraffin infiltration and embedding. Okay, so you can use it as a substitute for your ethanol. Alright, so other alcohol dehydrants that we use in histopath, we have your methanol. Okay, however, take note that methanol, this is considered to be a toxic dehydrating agent. I'm pretty sure that you will be able to learn about methanol toxicity in your clinical chemistry too. Okay, yes. Another name that we use to refer to your methanol is your wood alcohol. Okay, so methanol, this is otherwise referred to as your wood alcohol. Okay, wood alcohol. All right. So actually, if you are going to look at methanol itself, okay, methanol itself is not toxic, but when you introduce methanol to the body, okay, it undergoes conversion to toxic products or to toxic metabolites. So in particular, I think this is being taught in organic chemistry, if I'm not mistaken. So once methanol becomes available or is present in the body, okay, so it will undergo conversion. So from methanol, it will be oxidized. Okay, oxidation product of methanol. Okay, very good. We have your formaldehyde. Okay, which is toxic. Tama? Formaldehyde is a toxic substance, especially if it's present inside the body. Okay, furthermore, if you are going to allow formaldehyde to be converted, it can still be converted to formic acid. Okay, is formic acid toxic? Yes. Yan. So that's the problem with your methanol. That's why it is considered to be a toxic dehydrating agent. Because if it is present inside the body, it will be converted to toxic metabolites such as your formaldehyde and your formic acid. Okay? Remember, formic acid, it can cause blindness. If I'm not mistaken, it has a high affinity to the cataracts of the eye, ba? Or something like that. Okay, so it can cause blindness. Okay, and also formic acid, it is the reason why the bites of ants, di ba? The stingy sensation that you feel after you are bitten by ants, especially if it is abuos, di ba? Abuos is are very big ants. They usually live in mango trees. So for those who are living in the province, I'm sure you know that. Okay, so the stingy sensation that you feel is it's because of the formic acid which are present in ants. Okay, anyway, yun lang. All right. So since it is a toxic dehydrating agent, so again, its use in the laboratory is just for the dehydration, actually fixation and dehydration of your blood tissue films, blood and tissue films, as well as your smear preparations. Okay, so we are trying to limit our exposure to methanol in the laboratory since it is toxic. Okay, so another alcohol dehydrant that you can use in histopath, we have your butyl alcohol or your butanol. Okay, so your butyl alcohol, this is considered to be a slow-acting dehydrating agent. Okay, the good thing about your slow-acting reagents is that um, the consequences are usually not very serious as compared to rapid-acting ones. Okay, so that means since your butyl alcohol is considered to be a slow-acting dehydrating agent, it causes less shrinkage. Okay, it causes less shrinkage and hardening. Okay, it causes less shrinkage and hardening of your tissue sample, which is actually an advantage if, for example, rapid processing is not required. So if there is no sense of urgency in the sample that you are trying to process in the laboratory, butyl alcohol is actually a good choice for dehydration. Okay, so thus, your butyl alcohol, this is recommended for tissues with no urgency. Okay, with no sense of urgency. All right, so there are two formulations of butyl alcohol that we can use in the laboratory. So we have your N-butyl alcohol. Okay, so the first one we have your N-butyl alcohol and the other one is your tertiary. Okay, your third butyl. Tertiary butyl alcohol. Okay, so we have your N-butyl alcohol and your or tertiary butyl alcohol. Okay, so this formulations of butyl alcohol, so they are oftentimes used in combination with ethanol. Okay, so they can be used in combination with ethanol. Okay, so that means you can use these formulations of butyl alcohol in order to substitute for the higher concentrations of ethanol. Okay, so I repeat, N-butyl alcohol or your butyl alcohol in general. Okay, so it can be used in combination with ethanol. So in particular, you can use your butyl alcohol to replace the higher concentrations of ethanol during the dehydration process. Okay? Remember, if we go back to one of the disadvantages of your ethanol is that the higher concentrations of your ethanol, they can, okay, they can, sabi niya dyan, higher concentrations of your ethanol um, can cause, okay, some damages to your tissue sample. Okay, so in order to prevent or to avoid rather the use of high concentrations of your ethanol, you can make use of your butyl alcohol instead. Okay, so that means, okay, kasi in combination eh. Okay, so that means during the or for the low concentrations, okay, for the lower concentrations, okay, for the lower concentrations of alcohol, you make use of ethanol. All right. However, for higher concentrations of your alcohol, okay, so you can, instead of using your ethanol, you can make use of your butanol instead. Okay, you can make use of your butanol instead. So that's why it says there, in combination. Okay, in combination with ethanol. Alright, yan. So it will not replace your ethanol for the whole dehydration process. It will be used together with your ethanol. Okay? Yan. Ano pa ang hindi ko nasabi sa'yo? Okay. So your butanol, this is also utilized for the dehydration of plants and animals. Okay? For plants and animals. Okay. So other advantages of butyl alcohol. Ayan. Your butyl alcohol, it is miscible in paraffin. Okay? It is miscible in paraffin and thus it can also act as a clearing agent. So that means after dehydration in your butyl alcohol, you can already proceed to your infiltration with the use of your paraffin. Because, okay, because butanol is miscible in your paraffin. So that means your tissue sample is already compatible with your paraffin. So you can omit the clearing process. Okay? Yes. So those are your alcohol dehydrants. So now let us move on to the other dehydrating agents that we can use in the laboratory. Okay, so first off, we have your acetone. Okay, so your acetone, this is considered to be a cheap and a rapid dehydrating agent. So dehydration can be accomplished in as short as 30 minutes to 2 hours. Okay, thus your acetone, it is considered or it is utilized for most of the urgent biopsies or for most urgent biopsies in the laboratory. Okay, the problem is that, and the problem is that um, since it is rapid in its action, okay, since it is rapid, I'm sorry, hindi siya problem. Hindi siya since. Okay, wait. Erase, erase. I cannot take 5 or take 6 na. Okay, erase, erase. Okay? Although, yun pala dapat ang ginamit kong word. Okay? Although your acetone is considered to be a rapid-acting dehydrating agent, the penetration of your acetone into your tissues is poor. Okay, so penetration is poor even if it is considered to be rapid, right? Okay, so apart from that, so another disadvantage of your acetone, it causes brittleness and shrinkage of your tissue. Okay, brittleness and shrinkage of your tissue, and it removes lipids which are supposed to be present in your tissue sample. Right? Ayan. And, eto pa, aside from that, the use of your acetone in the laboratory is limited. Why? Because it is an extremely volatile substance and it is also an extremely flammable substance. Okay? Yes. So remember that in tissue processing, you need high volumes or high amounts of your reagents. Okay? But since acetone can be dangerous, so we are limiting our acetone use in the laboratory. All right. So another dehydrating agent that you can use, we have your Cellusolve. Okay. Cellusolve, this is otherwise referred to as your EGME. Lagi akong natatawa dito. EGME. Okay. EGME. So, EGME stands for ethylene glycol. Okay. Monoethyl ether. I think nasa inyo to. Ayan. Ethylene glycol monoethyl ether. Okay. Or EGME. So, that's the other name of your Cellusol. Alright? Yes. So, your EGME, okay, it is a rapid-acting dehydrating agent. And apart from that, it does not have any harmful effect on your tissue sample. Okay, so I repeat, it is rapid and it does not have any harmful effect on your tissue sample. So that's why storage in your Cellusolve or storage in your EGME is possible even for months. So even if you are going to store it or even if you're going to immerse your tissue sample in Cellusolve for months, okay, kahit ilang buwan pa yan, it will not have any harmful effect on your tissue sample. Okay? So in short, since it's rapid and since it does not cause any detrimental effect on your tissue sample, Cellusolve in if we consider its effect, okay, or its effects on the tissue is the best dehydrating agent. Okay? Siya actually ang the best. Kung ang titignan lang natin ay yung yung effect niya, okay, sa tissue sample. Tama? Kasi unang-una, it's rapid and it does not have any harmful effect. Okay? The problem with your Cellusolve is that it is toxic. Okay? Toxic po yan. Yan, very toxic po siya. And it can be toxic to your reproductive, okay, to your fetal system. So pregnant personnel should never handle your Cellusolve, to your urinary system, and to your blood system. And apart from that, it is toxic via the different modes of entry. So it is toxic to by inhalation. It is toxic by skin contact. It is toxic by ingestion. Okay? So because of the toxicities of your Cellusolve, we cannot use it routinely in the laboratory. Even if um even if it is rapid and even if it doesn't have any harmful effect on the tissue. Okay? So okay nga yung tissue, pero yung personnel mo, 'di ba? O mamamatay na yung personnel mo. So alin ang mas importante? Siyempre yung personnel mo. Right? Okay? So that's why it cannot be used routinely in the laboratory. Okay? Because of the toxicities that are attributed to the use of your Cellusolve. Okay? So apart from that, your Cellusolve is also combustible at low temperatures. So we have 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So if I'm not mistaken, maybe this is around 40 something degrees Celsius. Okay? So it is very combustible even at low temperatures. Okay? So that's the problem. Alright, so if for example, there is really a need for you to make use of your Cellusolve, so instead of your EGME, you can make use of your propylene-based glycol ethers in place of your cellusol. Okay, so how do we perform cellusol processing? So cellusol processing or dehydration is accomplished using 4 baths, 4 changes or 4 baths of cellusol. Okay, so you are going to immerse your tissue for 30 minutes in your first cellusol or in cellusol 1, and then immerse it for another 30 to 60 minutes in your cellusol 2, and then another 60 minutes for in your cellusol 3, and lastly 90 minutes in your cellusol 4. Okay, so 4 baths or 4 changes of your cellusol. So after that, you make use of xylene as your clearing agent. Okay. Yes. Now let us move on to the next dehydrating agent, and we have your dioxane. Okay, so your dioxane, this is otherwise referred to as your diethylene dioxide. So your dioxane, it can be used both as a dehydrating agent and a clearing agent. So that means, okay, that means after fixation, okay, after fixation, you are going to perform dioxane processing, okay, dioxane processing. So after dioxane processing, the next one is for you to perform paraffin, okay, next is for you to perform paraffin processing, okay, so this will include both your infiltration and embedding. Okay, so that means you can omit, okay, you can omit the clearing process if you are going to make use of your dioxane. Okay, yes. The problem or the disadvantage of your dioxane is that there is poor rebonding of sections during the cutting process or the sectioning process. Okay, so when we say poor rebonding of sections, you will not be able to produce your ribbon. Okay, ano bang ibig sabihin ng ribbon? Okay, so ribbon means the series of sections that are produced during sectioning or during cutting. Okay, so what happens is that the sections will be cut. Okay, hindi cut hiwa-hiwalay in Tagalog. Okay, so that is what is meant by poor ribboning. So the sections are hiwa-hiwalay. It will not be, okay, it will not be a long section or a long ribbon. All right, so that's the problem with your dioxane. Okay, so there is poor ribboning of your sections. And apart from that, it is expensive. Okay, it is expensive and it can be extremely dangerous. Okay, it can be extremely dangerous. Okay, why is it extremely dangerous? Because it is liable to form, rather, okay, it is liable to form explosive peroxides. Okay, so it is liable to form explosive peroxides. Okay, and apart from that, it produces a vapor that accumulates inside the body. Okay, and this cumulative vapor, it is highly toxic to the personnel. Okay, so I repeat, it also produces cumulative vapor, which is highly toxic to the personnel. All right, ayan. How do we perform your dioxane processing? So your dioxane processing, so you can, there are 2 methods of dioxane processing. We have your Gropner's method, and then the other one is your Weisberger's method. Okay, so your Gropner's method makes use of pure dioxane only. Okay, so as compared to your Weisberger's method, which makes use of pure dioxane plus your anhydrous, okay, plus your anhydrous calcium oxide. Ayan. So, plus your anhydrous calcium oxide. Alright? So, again, since your calcium oxide is anhydrous, what will its purpose be? Its purpose is to remove water molecules from the pure dioxane fluid or solution. Okay? Yes. Um, apart from these two methods, your dioxane can also be used as a substitute. Okay, it can also be used as a substitute for the highest concentration of alcohol during the dehydration process. Okay, so what are the two substances, therefore, that we can use as a substitute for alcohol during or for the highest concentration of alcohol during the dehydration process? We have two. We have your butyl alcohol and your dioxane. Okay, and your dioxane. Okay, why, why? Okay, um, bakit? Sige, magtagalog na ako. Okay, bakit pwede natin siyang gamitin as a substitute? This is because of the fact that your dioxane produces less shrinkage. Okay, so I repeat, your dioxane produces less shrinkage and storage of your sample in dioxane is possible even for months. Okay, kahit ilang buwan pa. Pwede mong, you can immerse your tissue sample in your dioxane. Okay? In your dioxane. Right? Ayan. Another one precautionary measure with the use of your dioxane is when we are handling, okay, when we are handling chromate fixed, okay, chromate fixed tissue samples. So for chromate fixed tissue samples, you have to wash, okay, wash adequately. You have to wash it adequately before immersing it, okay, before immersing it in dioxane. Okay, so I repeat, for chromate fixed tissue samples, you have to wash it adequately before immersing it in dioxane. Okay, in dioxane. Alright, yan. So those are the things that you have to remember for your dioxane. Okay, so now let us move on to another. We have your tetrahydrofuran. Okay, so again, your tetrahydrofuran, this can be used as a dehydrating and a clearing agent. Okay, and another, it dissolves fats. Okay, that's the disadvantage. Actually, it has a lot of disadvantages, your tetrahydrofuran. Number one, it dissolves fats, okay? It produces vapors, which can cause nausea and dizziness, headache, and anesthesia, okay? It is also considered as a skin and eye irritant, and it has been implicated with conjunctivitis, okay? So apart from that, your tetrahydrofuran has an offensive odor. Okay, yon. So those are the many disadvantages of your tetrahydrofuran in the laboratory. Although you can use it both as a dehydrating and a clearing agent. However, if you're going to look at the hazards, okay, that it can cause to our personnel, might as well not use it in the laboratory. Okay? Yes. Right, so another, and I think this is the last one, we have your triethyl phosphate. So your triethyl phosphate, its use in the laboratory is limited for the dehydration of sections only. Okay, sections and smears after staining. Okay, so your triethyl, sorry, your triethyl phosphate, it readily removes water. Ayan, it readily removes water and causes little distortion. Okay, so before we end our discussion on dehydration, of course, I would like to add the different additives that we use for, or to rather, your dehydrants or your additives to dehydrating agents. Okay? So take note, guys, that the additives to dehydrants or additives to your dehydrating agents, they don't have the same purpose as the additives for or as the additives to your decalcifying agents. So if we go back to our discussion in decalcification, what is the purpose of additives in in your decalcifying agent? Yes, to protect your tissue samples. Okay? But the additives to your dehydrants, they have a different purpose. So their purpose is to, okay, is to soften your tissue sample. Okay, so I repeat, additives to dehydrants, okay, they are incorporated for tissue softening. Okay, so again, what is the issue, or what is the consequence that we want to prevent when we are performing the process of dehydration? So remember that the dehydration process, okay, it can cause hardening of your tissue sample. So I repeat, the dehydration process, one consequence of this is that it can cause hardening of your tissue samples. And of course, we don't want that. Kasi nga, na-harden na siya. It has already been adequately hardened during your fixation process. We don't want to harden it again during your dehydration process. Otherwise, the other reagents which are utilized in the succeeding steps will no longer be able to penetrate your tissue sample. Okay? And so, we have to incorporate your additives for tissue softening or to prevent hardening of your tissue samples. Okay? So, additives to dehydrants, these are oftentimes incorporated to the 95% concentration of your dehydrating agents. Or in short, to the last concentration of alcohol that is utilized in the dehydration process. Okay? Because take note, between your lower concentrations and your higher concentrations of alcohol particularly, which one will cause hardening of your tissue sample? It's your higher concentrations. Okay? Yan. So I repeat, additives to dehydrants, they are added to your 95% concentration or to whatever concentration used in the dehydration process. Okay, so the last concentration of alcohol that is utilized in the dehydration process, it is where we incorporate our additives. Okay, so what are the different additives to your dehydrants? We have your 4% phenol, and then we also have your glycerol alcohol mixture. Okay, and then of course, lastly, we have your Moliflex. Okay, so if you're going to look at it, these are also particularly your 4% phenol and your Moliflex. These are also tissue softeners that we use for decalcification, right? Okay, yan. So 4% phenol, glycerol alcohol mixture, and of course, we have your Moliflex. Right, so that's the end of our discussion in dehydration. So I'll see you again in my next video for clearing. Okay, so again, if you have any questions regarding dehydration, I will answer all of them on Thursday since we will be having our synchronous learning on Thursday. All right, I'll see you again in, yes, I'll see you again. All right, bye.